Where we've been talking about hard emotions, and I'm going to talk about grief. We've been taught a grief cycle, and um, that's never served me very well. So I just thought I would share um, something that the Lord has shown me around grief as more of a process that we do indeed get through and heal from instead of something we're stuck in forever. Um, So, if you don't know me, I'm McCove Johnson. I am the facilitator of this group. I am a Christian women's life coach specializing in childhood emotional neglect recovery. And if you don't know what childhood emotional neglect is, it's when a child's emotional needs are not met sufficiently by their parents. And it's not because their parents are bad most of the time. It's just because their parents don't know any better or don't have the skills to manage whatever else is happening in life along with their child's emotions. Um, but a lot of families, they just don't know how to deal with their own, so they don't know how to deal with their kids. It's just a matter of missing skills. Um, but anyway, talk about grief because we've been talking about hard emotions and so whatever hard emotion you're experiencing, grief is probably there as part of it. And um, so I wanted to look at grief, like I said, as a process that we can actually work through and have a place of healing um, that's a little different perspective than the grief cycle. Um, and I guess like when all of this, when I was really diving into this, well, it's been a couple of times, but my fourth my fourth pregnancy um, ended in a miscarriage. And so there was definitely a huge grieving season there. Um, and then um, a time when I had been in ministry and felt like I was being told I wasn't qualified anymore. And a lot of grief around that. And when my kids lost their grandfather, like trying to help them grieve in a healthy way instead of just like you're just gonna feel lousy and you're gonna be mad and you're gonna be sad and all of these things and you're kind of at the whim of your emotions and um it'll get less but it'll never get better kind of was how I interpreted the grief cycle, I guess. So I felt like the Lord gave me this acronym for grief. And so just the acronym using each letter of grief to represent a part of the process and what we can go through. Um, so G being get real. Um, because since we don't want to grieve, our culture doesn't do grief well. We don't really want to sit with that. Um, a lot of times, like, well, yeah, I'm sad and I'm sad. Um, so in the instance of losing my son um, at the beginning of second trimester, if we leave grief as simple as I lost my son and I'm just grieving that, I think that's part of why grief sticks with us so long. If we get real um, and be honest about everything that you've lost, and this is part of where grief will come up because we'll realize something else that we lost and then we need to grieve that too. So, yes, I lost my son, but within that big, huge loss, there's all kinds of little losses. Um, I lost the opportunity to know his personality. I lost the opportunity to see him interact with his siblings. I lost, the opportunity for all of those first to see him go to school, to see him play soccer, to see him get married. Like just all of those things are all of these little losses. And so to be really honest about instead of just trying to hurry through it, which, I'm always talking about in this group, like slow down. If you slow down and realize, what have I lost? What is everything that I've lost in this situation? Then you can grieve it and let it go. Um, so that's to start with, get real. What, excuse me, what have you lost? What is everything that you've lost? And as you think through all those things that you have lost, then the R is to realize what emotions you have with that, because you're not just sad, you're not just grieved. Um, you might be angry, you might feel betrayed, um, you might be disillusioned. Like there's all kinds of things that go with those losses. There's way more emotions than just I'm sad, I'm grieving. You are grieving, but the more emotions you can find and name, the more you can heal. Because once you can name something and you can deal with it, you can heal from it. And then the I is identify any lies that you're believing out of these emotions and out of these circumstances, because that's what the enemy loves to do. When we're hurt, when we're confused, he likes to come in and lie to us about ourselves, lie to us about God, lie to us about other people. So find those lies, like out of losing my son, believing that I must be a really bad mother, because God chose not to let me raise this one, like I was going to do such a bad job. And I didn't really believe that, but I felt that, and that was a lie that I had to fight. Um, so looking at what lies is the enemy trying to sell you based on your emotions and your circumstances. And then the E is to explore, to find the truth so that you can replace those lies and see, in some situations, maybe there's lessons to be learned so that you don't do that again. Um, trying, none of the examples I shared really have, lessons to be learned, but, maybe like with losing a grandfather, maybe the lesson learned is to be more present in relationships now, because maybe there's regrets of what wasn't, the conversations that weren't had, the experiences that weren't experienced. Um, so we've had G's get real with acknowledging all of the loss. And then R is realizing, recognizing, acknowledging your emotions, all of them, as many as you can identify. And part of grief too is not all sad. Like the kid's grandpa died, he'd been struggling with cancer for a few years. And so there's a relief, and there's a, a thankfulness, a gratitude that he's not suffering anymore. And that's part of like just being able to acknowledge all of those emotions. Identify is I, identifying any lies that you're believing about yourself or about God in this process. And then exploring the truth, looking in scripture, getting feedback from other people, asking the Lord, what is true here? What's the truth? And see if there's any lessons to be learned. And then the F, when I originally did it, I had it as following through with healness and wholeness. It also can be forgive. You might need to forgive yourself. You might need to forgive God. You might need to forgive somebody else. And I also think that the F can be fellowship. Like relationship is so important to our healing. We are made to be in relationship with people and see that we matter and see that they care and have our feelings and our experiences, our emotions validated. And that happens in relationship, in that fellowship. Um, and that doesn't happen with just everybody, it happens with safe people. Um, so, um, yeah, so just hopefully that's a different perspective on grief, that we can fully acknowledge what we've lost and what all those emotions are, what lies that's telling us, Because I think believing the lies perpetuates the process and makes it stick around longer. Um, and yes, things are still, I say things are still painful, but I don't know that they have to be. Like, as I'm talking about losing my son, it has been, see, he'd be 17, I think 16 or 17, and do my math, he'd be 17. Um, it doesn't hurt anymore. I've processed through everything that I've lost, and it definitely helps that I have the hope and the knowledge that I will see him again, and that like good came out of it too. I was never a bad mom to him. Like I never lost my temper with him. He didn't have to experience any wounding from me. He didn't have to experience any wounding in this world. Um, but too, that just, yes, it was a loss, but it doesn't define me anymore. And I've seen other people who have lost children who have let it define them, and it never gets better. Um, and I don't know, it doesn't have to be that way. God doesn't want us to be wounded forever. There's healing, there's hope. Um, and so hopefully that helps with dealing with hard emotions and things that you have to grieve. And right now in our world, like I gave examples of some big things, but there's a lot of big things. There's a lot of little things in our world right now to grieve, like just loss of normalcy. Um, so if you're feeling maybe more grief than it seems like would be normal or whatever, like there's a lot of grief in our world right now. There are people that are sick. There's so much fear. It's damaging relationships. The loss of trust for just, I don't know, the common decency of people, whatever. Like, there's a lot of things to grieve right now. And so, acknowledging that, um, and really acknowledging it, so you go through this process so that you can have healing from that too. And like, there'll always be more in this broken world. There'll always be more to grieve. But if we know how to grieve, and knowing that slowing down and actually processing it will help us get through it faster than trying to just keep pushing through and have life go on as normal. Um, so it's bless you in that. If there's something that you are grieving that you want prayer about or help processing through this, I would love to talk to you and be praying for you. And as always, I hope you have a great week, and ask me any questions or share your thoughts. And we'll see you again next week.